Big stories out there today, all involving M&A. Kroger's deal potentially being blocked. Well,
I know. I don't know.
Walgreens Boots maybe going take private. I wasn't done. You got to wait for the dramatic pause, Carol Massar.
Do I have it yet?
No.
Okay.
And Nippon Steel,
I know.
U.S. Steel, looks like that's done.
Look at U.S. Steel. Although Joe Doe was just in the studio and he's like, may not be completely done. So we're going to watch for that one. I will just say I've been watching the home builders, man. They're under pressure, down about 3% here. And this has to do with Toll coming out, Toll Brothers. And they gave out a forecast indicating continued pricing pressure due to high mortgage rates. So we've seen the whole home builder group under pressure in today's session.
How come everyone's ignoring Bitcoin? Down 0.6%, above $95,000.
0.6%.
Yeah,
that's why we're all ignoring
Is that allowed for Bitcoin? I thought they were only supposed to move in like increments of 10% or more.
Bitcoin's price.
Yeah.
Do not worry.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, hit $100,000, then comes back.
Yeah,
exactly. That's basically unchanged for Bitcoin at this point. You got to wonder though about these deals that are blocked. I mean, won't the companies just kind of sit tight for a couple months and then they can push it through again?
Well, that was my question, Scarlett. I mean, obviously the Kroger deal, which has been like 2 years in the making, I guess I could understand why they would walk away from that. But you also kind of wonder, I don't know, if you had waited another month and a half, would you have a different environment?
I mean, it's very possible, but it's been 2 years already. So
yeah, I guess, yeah. And as Bloomberg reporters are pointing out, they've already racked up almost $1 billion in costs related to that acquisition. And that's not even including a potential breakup fee should it fall apart. We get the closing bells in New York, and it is red across the screen here in U.S. markets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 150 points, or about 0.3%. Similar percentage drops for the S&P 500 as well as the NASDAQ Composite. The Russell 2000 closing out the day down about 10 points, or 0.4%.
All right, back to the big caps I go in the S&P 500, guys. And it's definitely a much more negative tone today. 154 names in the S&P 500 gaining ground today. Scarlett, 348 to the downside.
All right, let's take a look at the sector performances, too, because there's a lot of red on that screen. You've got communications, services, consumer staples, and consumer discretionary in the green. But really, the only group that is up firmly is communications services, thanks to Alphabet. On the downside, tech and REITs losing at least 1%, and materials and utilities also down about 0.8%.
All right, let's get to some of the individual gainers, if I may. And Walgreens Boots, this is your number one gainer in the S&P 500. It's up almost 18% in today's session. Wall Street Journal coming out with a report earlier today that the company's in talks to sell itself to Sycamore Partners. It's a PE private equity firm. So we saw really big moves. Stock was up as much as 28% in today's session. Its biggest single day gain since at least 1980. That was on, of course, an intraday basis. So keep in mind that this is a stock that's been under pressure throughout the last year, losing about 2/3 of their value over the course of the year through Monday. So interesting to see, and we'll have to see ultimately whether or not some kind of deal gets done.
Yeah, the Journal had some great statistics showing all the sort of takeover attempts or takeover sort of kicking the tires of this company and the valuations they were at, and it's just down.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So a little bit of a different tone today, but we'll see what happens. So stand by, TBD on this one. Google, Alphabet, this one was top gainers in both the NASDAQ 100 and the S&P 500, guys, up almost 6% in today's session. You had the company analysts applauding the Google parent announcement yesterday of a major development in quantum computing through the use of its Willow quantum chip. So there's some of that going on. There's another side story on how Google is investing in mega energy parks that will generate renewable power as the company races to fuel its data centers. I mean, that's been going on as an aside. But anyway, that one definitely on our radar. And then I just want to bring up Boeing, if I may, in terms of that company. And that stock, I'm looking at about a 4.5% gain in today's session, so a little bit off its highs, saying it resumed assembly of its best-selling aircraft after a debilitating 53-day-long strike. November deliveries coming in at the lowest in 4 years. So they're delivering 737 MAX models in November, some 787 Dreamliners, and 2 777 freighters as well. I just came in from South Carolina, and they have a Boeing facility.
I knew you were going to do that, Romaine.
Anyway, they have a Boeing facility, and I saw a lot of planes looked like they were ready to go.
That's where they do 787s.
Yeah,
down there.
yeah, definitely saw that.
Hey, I want to start with Oracle shares. In the S&P 500, it was among the worst performers on a percentage basis. They fell the most in a year after the company reported lukewarm quarterly revenue. It disappointed investors who had sent shares of the company to its best year-to-date performance going back a couple decades. The company did recently boost the stock to a record high on enthusiasm for that cloud business. As we mentioned just minutes ago, a lot of news moving stocks late in the trading session having to do with M&A, starting with Albertsons. Shares fell as much as 10% after a judge blocked Kroger's $24.6 billion acquisition of Albertsons. But look at that, just in the final minutes of trading, giving back some of those losses, bouncing up, shares closing down about 2.3%. The judge is finding that the takeover would lessen competition for U.S. grocery shoppers. A ruling marks a likely death knell for the deal. We did have Jennifer Rhee, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Antitrust Litigation Analyst, on the program. She was a bit surprised by that initial stock reaction, given that a lot of folks were skeptical this deal would actually go through. And Jen, by the way, saying she thinks this one is done, and these two are living on as sort of standalone companies, at least in the near future. And then finally, shares of U.S. Steel, ticker X, down 9.7% today. President Joe Biden planning to formally block the $14.1 billion sale of U.S. Steel Corp to Nippon Steel on national security grounds once that deal is referred back to him later this month. This, according to people familiar with the matter. Joe Doe and Josh Wingrove on our Bloomberg News team having the exclusive on this one.
All right, well, I'm taking a look at the bond market, guys, because it wasn't that exciting either. You saw a little bit of selling pretty much across the curve. You had a 3-year auction that was a little bit light, but like nothing to write home about. And I do want to point out, tomorrow you get the 10-year, and then you get the 30-year, which will be about, quick math in my head, $63 billion worth over the next 2 days. So we'll see how that goes. So look at the long end for that one.
Well
did you really
done,
do that
well
in your
done.
head?
I did. Was I right? 40, 50, 60? Yeah.
I'm
no,
sure
61. 61.
I don't know if you say so.
I could have done that before. But okay, 61 billion.
The government needs to raise a lot of money.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we are still getting some earnings, including not a Stitch Fix here. 1Q operating loss of from continuing operations of about 5 cents a share. Not quite clear the comparison on that here, but their revenue in the quarter also coming in at about $318 million. You see the share price reaction there here, 10% to the upside. So at least the knee-jerk reaction investors seem to like.
All right,
what
guys.
they've seen.
GE Vernova, and we should point out Stitch Fix, as you said, up 15% here. GE Vernova also out. Let's get right to the outlook, because that's what investors are going to probably mostly care about. They still see fiscal year adjusted FCF about $1.3 billion to $1.7 billion. The estimate, that's quite a range. Estimate is $1.67 billion. Sees 2025 adjusted FCF $2 to $2.5 billion. The estimate is $1.79 billion. And the company declaring its first quarterly dividend of 25 cents a share. Sees 2025 revenue 36 to 37 billion. The estimate is 37.24 billion. Stock just a hair higher in the aftermarket.
All right.
Can I just say it? They approve a $6 billion share buyback. Just want to squeeze that in.
Okay. Well,
Sorry.
that might account for why the stock is up a third of 1%.
Right.
I'm looking at GameStop, and as usual, there's not a whole lot to work with here, but we can tell you that third quarter adjusted EPS came in at 4 cents a share. Net sales did seem to miss analyst estimates as well. And in terms of hardware and accessory sales, that fell 28%. There aren't really estimates to compare it to. There are 2 estimates, really, and that did miss analyst estimates. The stock up about 2/3 of 1%, but when has the stock really ever moved on earnings?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'm taking a look at General Motors here. Some announcement coming out here as well. GM halting funding of Cruise's robo-taxi development. GM's going to combine Cruise and GM technical teams into a single effort to prioritize the development of advanced driver assistance systems on a path to fully autonomous personal vehicles. So they're kind of realigning what they're doing on that. They're going to build on the progress, they say, of Super Cruise, which is the hands-off, eyes-on driving feature that's now offered and currently logging over 10 million miles per month.
Yeah, obviously a bit of a cost savings, too, saying that it could lower spending by about $1 billion a year. But this was kind of a long time coming. We talk about the big changes that we saw in the executive leadership for that Cruise division. And then some of the comments by Mary Barra herself here is not that they're abandoning this project, but it was clearly very costly, and at least in the short term, hadn't really been providing anything accretive to the bottom line. So I guess she's doing what she has to do to keep this thing alive.
Also, if I remember correctly, the challenges that the actual company's cars have had in the real world, navigating the real world environment, and the way that we're seeing Waymo just continue to announce expansion, it's trying to do the exact same thing. I've
always been curious about the technology, because obviously they're using slightly different technology, but the underlying underlying nature of it all is still the same. So I'm always confused as to why one of these companies is able to make progress and the other isn't.
And not to mention completely different tech than what Tesla is doing.
Tesla has,
with its cameras.
One last headline: GM in pact to raise Cruise stake to over 97% from about 90%, so upping it by about 7%. All right, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals, folks. We call it the closing bell. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.